Alright, so let's see if this works out in terms of the jerry rigging stand I made. Show a picture later. Anyway, this is me working on my carburetors for my 1983 Yamaha Virago XV500. Both of my carburetors needed a rebuild after I went on a long trip. And after I took them apart, I noticed that one of them had a tear, or at least pinholes in one of the diaphragms. I'm not sure if they were there before or not, but at least I noticed them after I took the carbs apart, or when I was putting them back together. The entire slide that comes in one of these carburetors is quite expensive, and I was hoping to avoid the expense of buying an entire slide because the diaphragm is attached to the slide with these plastic rings. So I've already replaced one of the diaphragms, but I'll show you what the rings look like. They're these little plastic rings that fit onto the diaphragm. And the diaphragm itself is this. And if you notice really closely here, you can kind of see that light coming through. So you don't want that because these are what are known as CV carbs, constant velocity carbs. Any kind of damage to this diaphragm will result in lack of a proper vacuum to operate the slide as you're controlling the throttle. So essentially what I did is I ordered a couple of replacement pieces, replacement diaphragms from JBM Industries. So you can see here, gives you a little bit of a guidance. The website is much better in terms of full instructions on how to put these on. But even looking at the instructions online, I felt like a video would probably be much better. So after putting together one of the carbs, the front one, I figured that I'd record my process of doing the rear one. So what's important here, and I've already loosened most of the screws, is just apologize for the angles here, but we'll try to see if I can do this best. So as you take apart this, there's a large spring that comes out, and you can see that the one I put in here, the diaphragm, I tried restoring a little bit before I put it in, before I noticed the holes, with something called Rubber Renew. So Rubber Renew is a blend of, what was it? Xylenes and methyl salicylate. Ugh, I can't even say that. Essentially, it's oil of wintergreen, which restores a lot of the moisture into most rubbers, and well, it rejuvenates it quite well. The reason I did that was after I had taken apart the carbs to clean them and tried to put them back together with the old diaphragms, the slides had shrunk, the diaphragms had shrunk quite a bit, so I couldn't fit it back onto this groove. So I had to essentially make it, well, there's two options, either replacing the entire slide or trying to rejuvenate the diaphragms themselves to allow it to fit better. Now, as you can see, when I took it out, the profile of this diaphragm isn't quite the best. It's aged, it's 30 years old at this point. The important thing to notice when you're going to be doing this work is how you took out the slide, because the slides themselves fit into the carburetor, and when you're actually installing it, there's this little lip on the diaphragm that aligns the slide with this little dot that's right, this little hole that's right in the middle of the slide at the bottom of it. And that hole has to align with the engine side of your carburetor. So where the butterflies are, that hole aligns with that directly. So essentially what you want to do is remember that when you're going to be replacing this, you're going to be wanting to go on that side again. So after you take out the slide with the diaphragm, you can move the carburetor aside for now. Let me see if I can move this a little bit better for myself here. Hopefully nothing falls. Hopefully dokily. Alright, so as I was saying before, the diaphragm itself looks like that, and there are two plastic rings, one at the top and one at the bottom, that hold the diaphragm in place, and you want to take those off in order to install the replacement diaphragm. Now, to do that is kind of a fragile procedure, although not really, and that's just with a couple of sharp pliers. And the way I did it at first was just really carefully. Now, you want to be careful with the needle, not to bend it, but just gripping the slide and just really carefully working your way up on one side at a time. Plastic on mine is quite old, so it fractures quite easily. So I just kind of dig it in there and then press down to get a little bit of a clip. And I kind of work my way through it until I get a chunk out. So I did a little triangular piece at first, just to get a little piece out. There we go. So it snaps off like that. You can see, after you do that, you can kind of work your way up a little bit more. Once you get far enough, it's just clip all the way through. But don't worry about the plastic itself. Worry about damaging the slide, because you're going to be reusing that. And don't worry about damaging the diaphragm, because, well, you're going to damage it. There's no way of doing this without damaging that. So while I'm doing that, whoop, so far so good. The diaphragms that come on these slides, as far as I understand, are rubber coated cloth, which are pretty durable. I mean, 30 years of work here is pretty damn good without too much damage. The JBM Industries one, as far as I can tell, is just rubber, albeit aircraft grade. There's conflicting reports on how long the JBM Industries ones last, but at this point, if I want to replace the whole slide assembly with the with the diaphragms, it'll cost about $150 per slide here in Canada, and I definitely don't want to do that. Anyway, so I got through the top ring here. You can see it just kind of comes off at this point, and then you just work your way around, and it should just come off like that once you get through. At this point, the diaphragm lifts off. You can see on this one I've put in some pinholes, but that doesn't matter at this point. And what you want to do is now remove this bottom ring, which now no longer serves a purpose either. So same way, just be careful with the slide. The slide is pretty fragile at this point. Okay, and that one single clip on my case here, and I went straight through. So then I can just really carefully take that off. So at this point you have a nice slip here, just like that on the slide. The needle's down here. That hole, remember, goes engine side, not intake side. And the next step here is to install the new diaphragm. So the new diaphragm is interesting in its design because it doesn't make use of any kind of plastic retainers, as you saw with the other one. And how it gets rid of that is with this thick rubber boot. You can see the difference between the original being very thin and this replacement. So this part, thick rubber boot, sits in this groove, and when I installed it on the other one, it actually sat quite well, enough that I didn't consider putting any glue on it or anything, as per the instructions on the site, which also mentioned that you could put glue on it, but it's not really necessary because the boot sits so well. Anyway, so let's try to see if I can do this on camera. You don't have to really align it. It's not that big of a deal. it fits on only one way. You'll definitely see that when you take it out of the bag. You don't want to install it this way. You want to install it this way because it curls up this way. There's no lip on this diaphragm as there is on this guy here. And that's because you're going to be aligning it yourself when you put it back into the carb. So it kind of just fits on really carefully. You squeeze it on. I just did it a little bit at a time. You don't want to stretch it too much because, you know, this is an important bit here. Let's see if I don't embarrass myself. I don't know if I'm doing this on camera. So you kind of just work your way around. And it does have a little bit of stretch in it, so you can maneuver your way. Be careful with the needle because it's still sticking out the bottom there. You can remove it, but I opted not to. Let's hope it's not a bad idea. Okay, so now it's almost on there. Oh man, not quite. There you go. Oh, nice stretch here. Okay, there we go. So like I said, that thick rubber boot at the bottom is quite thick, so it does have a little stretch in it, but you got to really be careful because again, you don't want to put any tears into the diaphragm. That's what you're doing this replacement for. And now at this point, I'm just working my way around, squeezing it down and making sure it fits into that groove on the slide. And as you can tell, it seats quite nicely into it. Alright, so there you go. So yeah, my carbs, should have mentioned, are Mikuni BS 34s with a 73 millimeter diameter diaphragm. Once it fits on, you'll notice that here I can't rotate the slide while keeping the diaphragm in place. So the diaphragm's thick rubber boot does a really good job of replacing these plastic retaining clips. So that's about it. So now what I'm doing is just making sure that it sits well, and it is sitting well. And I'm going to be reinstalling it into the carb. Again, with that hole at the bottom of it is going to be facing the engine. So I'm aligning it just by eye essentially. Yeah, before I put it in. The way you want to do this is you want to curl the diaphragm in the opposite direction when you're installing it. That way it seats properly. So you want to put it into a mushroom shape like that. Again, engine side on the hole, find the hole, and putting it in nice and slowly here. Mine's a little bit of a tight fit, there we go. Just rotate it around. And for the moment of truth here, this fits in right into that groove quite nicely. And I just work my way around. You can see the seat. It's very high quality. It's perfectly fit into there. These fit like brand new, and you can also tell by the roll how much nicer it is than when I initially opened up this carb. These are going to have a much easier time moving in there. It's beautiful. Alright, so the installation is good. So you can see that the little hole, I don't know if you can quite see it, is aligned with the engine side. At this point, there's not much else to do. They do recommend on the site that if you want to expedite further replacements or anything else you need to do, you can put a little red marker or marker of any kind onto the diaphragm itself so that you don't have to fiddle around with aligning it next time. I'll opt not to because it's not that big of a deal. I can always do it by hand. So that should take you through it, and hopefully helps you out with your rebuild process with the JBM Industries replacement diaphragm kit. Thanks.